Hey there, fellow garden enthusiasts. Hope everybody made it through this last freeze with your plants intact. It's a beautiful day now and spring is just around the corner. And as inevitable as those warm temperatures are, I'm starting to see ads come across my social media feed for these little guys. Happens every year. These little miracle prop balls. And I'll see the same things on all the little comments and threads and forums, people tagging their gardener friends in them, shocked by the miracle results and asking, do they work? But I've never seen anybody make a real world video of some of these balls in action and really kind of how to best utilize them. So I'm gonna take a few minutes and show you guys how to use these in the real world, maybe dispel some of the myths that are out there, and give you a couple tips and tricks to help you get the most success out of these guys. So the question I see asked most on the forums is, do these balls work? Let me just go ahead and answer it for you. Yes, they do work, because all these balls really are just a simple tool for air layering. And we know that air layering works because we've been doing air layering for years. So the question is not really, do these balls work? It's, do these balls work better than traditional air layering techniques? Are they easier than traditional air layering techniques? And maybe the most important, do you get those miracle results that you see on all those ads in just a couple weeks floating around social media and everything else? I'm going to answer those three questions here quickly for you. As I said, I'm going to dispel a couple of the myths, and I'm going to show you a couple of the most common problems that people face when trying to air layer and are not getting results that they see. And so our first question is really, do they work better? So to answer the questions quickly, in my opinion, no, they do not work better than traditional air layering techniques. I have found I generally get stronger results and more frequent success rates with traditional air layering than I do with using the balls. And the big difference between the two is that when you're doing traditional air layering, you really seal in the moisture. And it doesn't matter the medium, but that final wrap, that your plastic wrap for that final really seals in all the moisture that you have in the soil. And these balls, as you can see, aren't airtight. So they're prone to evaporation a lot more, which makes them a little more difficult to maintain. And I've found that all things equal to the traditional air layering and doing these balls, traditional air layering produces stronger results. And it's a little easier to maintain the project that you're doing once you get that initial wrap on there versus these. These have an initial setup that's easy, but a little bit more difficult to maintain throughout the season, which means, kind of your weekly sprays, you got to spray these a little bit when you're doing your regular watering. But I would not say that these balls do better results than traditional air layering with the tape and plastic around. And I think one of the large reasons is because of the evaporation factor, because they're not airtight. Of course, question two is, are they easier? And I think this is probably the biggest selling point of the balls, because they're quite easy to use and get onto your project that you're doing. I mean, a simple pack of the medium of your choice. I'll let you argue in the comments over which medium to use. Pack it in there nice and moist, and this is ready to go. I mean, you just literally clip this bad boy onto the project that you're doing, lock the little clasp here, and that's it. That one's ready to go. These and the wraps, the plastic, the traditional techniques take significantly longer than doing that. This is the big selling point for the ball for me. And I'll also add that I generally try to be specific about what I'm using them for. So if I'm trying to do a bunch of little spotted laurels or maybe gardenias, roses Sharon that are easy to root, I'm going to go for these balls and put a bunch of them out there. And if I have maybe a more finicky plant or something that's more difficult, I'm going to go with a traditional air layer that I'm really going to wrap that moisture in. But the ease of use for these balls, just to throw them out there real quick, at $1 a piece, is the big selling point. So of course the final question is, do you get the miracle results with these balls like you see on the video? And of course you already know the answer is no, you don't. You have no idea how long these prop balls have been on these plants in the videos. They make it appear that it's been a week or two and you just have amazing results. Now you'll get great results with these balls, but it takes time. And what truly affects the results that you're going to get are going to be how deep you get into the cambium layer, which I'm going to talk about here in just a second. It's going to be about the type of plant you're doing and how long that plant has been on. Again, some plants are way easier to propagate this way than others, and so maybe after a month you'll have great roots, whereas a slow grower might take a few months, even a year or so. You don't get the miracle results, but you do get some pretty good results as long as you use them properly. Let me talk to you about how to do that. Remember, the two biggest considerations when using these balls and air laying at all that generally are going to cause you problems are that you lose moisture and that you didn't get deep enough into the cambium layer. So remember, when you're using these balls, you can see they're not airtight. So you've got to make sure that at least once a week or twice a week, whenever you're doing your regular watering, that you are kind of spraying the bush and watering so that your medium will get wet and stay wet. That is a common problem. And then the other most common problem for not getting results is you did not get deep enough into the cambium layer to generate the roots. I'll often put a little root hormone, sprinkle a little root hormone on the part of the plant that I'm going to try and do, just as a little tip. But again, make sure you get deep enough, make sure you keep this guy moist, and a little rooting hormone, you're gonna have some good success. Leave it on there long enough. I put these on in the beginning of spring and usually pull them off at the end of August, and I have pretty good results. I'm gonna show you some real-time use of these balls throughout my last growing season, and finish the video out that way. So let's look at some real world examples, some successes, some failures, plus a couple of myths, and maybe you can see what they look like along the way. So this is gardenia. It's pretty early on, but I really didn't get into the cambium too much. It's got a little callus up top. But this is the most common problem, is not getting deep enough into the cambium layer and your project not throwing roots. This is off that same gardenia bush. And I did get deep enough into the layer here. You can already see a little bit difference. That ball is hanging nicely. A nice root coming off. This is probably 6 weeks or so into the season, maybe a month. Here's a Japanese quince. Same deal, just did not get deep enough. It's got a nice little surface callus there up top. This one never threw roots and I had to abandon it. So making sure that you get deep enough into the cambium is the most common problem that will cause your project not to throw roots. Now here's an azalea. You can see it's very early on here, but you'll barely see those little root nodules starting there on it. And that looks pretty deep, and it is. But azaleas are slow growers, and I did pull that one. I think you'll be able to see that layer. Here's a fig. I highly recommend figs for those just starting out. They're very easy to root. I think this was midsummer, maybe about a month in, maybe 6 weeks. Generally would not pull it this early, but I pulled it just to show you guys. You can see that early root development. I do cut this, and you'll see it a little bit later. Not super strong at this time, but they will continue to get stronger. Check those out. Put a little key lime here. These are always fun. You can see here, throwing some roots off the side, trying to hold on to it. Again, I wouldn't generally pull this off as early as it is. I do pull it off just to show you guys, a couple stages of it. But this guy does make it. You'll see him a little bit later on. That's probably 6 weeks or so in. Here's a spotted laurel. These are pretty easy to do. I also recommend these. You can see that this one is just starting to root. Hold on, knock this ball off in a second. See at the top there? So it's just starting to root. There's about a month in. So again, it's not 2 weeks in and you just have these super amazing, spectacular roots, but it is starting to root. And here is a month later. So it took about 2 months to get to this process. And you've got some nice fat roots. I do pull this off. You'll see him a little bit later. But again, that took about 2 months. So it's not 1 week, and those are generally fairly easy to grow. Here's a Japanese maple. I could have kicked myself for pulling this one off as early as I did. I just got a little anxious on it. It was throwing some roots on the side, you see here growing. And then on this other side, you'll see some nice root nodules starting there. I pulled it off too early. It ended up dying with the summer heat. I'll show it to you in a second. Here's a Rosa Sharon. Rosa Sharon also super easy. You can see some nice roots there, but you can see it's dying. And this is one of the problems you'll come into a lot is ants. So be wary of ants. If all of a sudden it looks like it's dying, you might have an ant infestation. I do pull this off and try to save it. It did not make it through this summer. Sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. You know, it's just one of those things. But the ants got a hold of him. He was throwing nice roots. Rosa Sharons are easy for beginners. If you have one around you can do. There he is. There's that fig tree right after I pulled it. Planted him down. And I'll show you in a sec. There's that Japanese maple. I pulled him earlier. He's just dying. He died completely. They will look angry sometimes, you know, after you pull them off. That doesn't mean they're going to die inevitably. That Japanese maple did die. That lime tree looks pissed. He's still alive. That fig tree dropped all the leaves, but it is alive and kicking now. I'll show that to you in a little bit. Here you have a gardenia. You know, gardenias are very, you know, wanton to root, so I like to have fun with those. My wife loves them as well. So we plant as many of those as we can. But look, ants again. So just be aware of it. I do cut it. I do plant this one to try and save it, and it does make it. This one is still alive. So just because you get the ants, it doesn't mean it's a death trap. But that's definitely one of the pests that come along with these balls, that I have not had that problem with traditional air layering. So be wary of that. Here's some success stories, some gardenias. You'll see some good roots on these guys. All of these get planted up. They all survive the winter. They're alive now. I'll do a little pan shot of all these in a little bit. But sometimes you'll see this where it's just like one side kind of roots. You know, there's like one main root off of it. This guy's bulging. You can tell he's going to be a good one. Another gardenia. So again, keeping them nice and moist, making sure they don't dry out, very important. These will dry out. You can see that this one looks a little dry. But making sure you spray them at least once a week. You don't have that problem with traditional air layering. That is something that you have to do with these balls, but you know, they will make some nice roots. And they are easy to do. So here's a traditional air layering that I wanted to show you guys, just to kind of compare. You can see big, beautiful roots on this guy. I've heard people say all the time, you know, you have to have black or you have to have an opaque color or else, you know, algae will grow in there. I use clear plastic water bottles for all of my traditional air layering, just to recycle them. We drink a lot of them. And, you know, wrapped up with some good grafting tape, they make outstanding roots. And unlike the balls, I do not have to water them throughout the season. You can see how moist this is just from rainwater, I guess, and from the beginning of the season. I will say, of course, that putting these on are much more labor intensive, and I can probably get 5 of the balls on for one of these. So depending on what I'm doing, I might go with the ball method or the traditional air layering. There's that gardenia planted up. He's happy. Here's so there's some of those azaleas. They're blooming. You know, this is in March 2022, but you know, just the season. That azalea was pulled off. Both that white and that red one were pulled off. That lime's pulled off. That lemon was. It's one of those gardenias you were looking at. Some hydrangea cuttings. Yeah, I got some cuttings on here too. That's that lime that pulled off. Looking happy. Remember how angry he was looking earlier? Those fig trees are still alive. I don't have them in the picture. And then the last one here is that spotted laurel. Looking great. So what's the final verdict? You're not going to get the miracle results that you see on the ads, but we know that as Facebook ads. But the balls do work. I use them a lot. They do not work quite as well as traditional air layering. They are much faster than traditional air layering. They got a little bit more upkeep throughout the season, but are super easy to set up. It just really depends on the project that you're looking for. Don't buy them, expect to, you know, have double every plant in your garden in the next season. But again, play around with them. They're worth it. They're $1 a piece. They're super easy to use, and I love them. I use them all the time. I hope this video has helped. You'll have a great growing season, and you know,